He smashed our wedding cake with a baton. He called our music jungle and our guests you people. Tell me this. If someone stormed into your backyard on your wedding day and did that, what would you have done? I can still hear the first crack, the way sugar and sponge give way under rubber, and rage the way conversation dies mid-laugh, like someone cut the power to joy. It was late spring, that kind of lazy sunlight that slips through tree leaves and paints everything gold, and our brand new backyard looked like a magazine cover we somehow wandered into by accident and then decided to keep. We had a live jazz quartet tucked under the big oak, a table of chilled champagne sweating into silver buckets, a 7-tier cake that Lena picked because it reminded her of old New Orleans bakeries, kids chasing each other between chairs, while the grown-ups tried to act like they weren't already tipsy. Lena was in simple white, not the kind of dress that screams at you from across the lawn, just the kind that makes you lean in and notice how her smile switches on the lights in your chest. We were home. That word has weight when you've dragged it across years of paying dues and swallowing comments and pretending a key card at the office means the same thing as a key to the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Then his boots hit our grass. Thud, thud, like a drum line nobody invited. The sax player missed a note. Conversations trailed off, the way birds know a storm is coming before the first cloud. He cut a straight path through the laughter-crisp, uniform-squared shoulders, chin locked in that permanent flinch some men wear when they've never been told no. The badge caught the sun. The nameplate said Miller. The eyes said something else entirely. Something like counting, something like measuring who does and does not belong in the space his shoes occupy. "I'm getting noise complaints," he said. No hello, no sorry to interrupt, just a phrase that sounded like policy and felt like a shove. His hand rested on his holstered sidearm. Casual, lazy, but not really. It sat there like a promise he thought he might cash. He let his eyes sweep the yard and land on me, sweep and land again on Lena, and then he added, "This isn't the kind of neighborhood for this sort of racket." I felt that knot in my gut. The one you grow over a lifetime of tiny cuts you tell yourself are paper thin while they bleed anyway. I swallowed it. De-escalation is a muscle, not a miracle. So I stepped forward, kept my palms visible, kept my voice calm. "Officer, I hear you," I said, the cadence you use when a rookie informant wants to burn the case because he's scared and needs you to take the temperature down. "We can ask the band to turn it down. It's our wedding reception. We just moved in next door. I'm Marcus. This is my wife, Lena." I offered a hand like a bridge. He watched it like a wasp and didn't take it. "I don't care who you are," he said. "I care about the law. You're disturbing the peace." Then his gaze rolled over the crowd, slowed on brown and black faces, like a scanner that only beeps for one kind of barcode. You people need to learn that when you move into a place like this, you follow the rules. You people. 2 words that can turn summer air into glass. Lena's fingers tightened on my elbow. The quartet stopped completely. Somewhere a fork slipped and dinged a glass, and then the sound just hung there like a question that didn't want an answer. I said the thing that should have turned the tide. "Officer Miller, for the record, I am law enforcement. Supervisory Special Agent FBI. I didn't reach for the badge, I didn't need to. There's a way someone stands when they belong to a chain of command, and there's a way someone speaks when truth has gravity." He snorted. "FBI right. And I'm the president." Loud enough for everyone to hear. You could feel him decide he'd rather call reality a liar than let it contradict the story in his head. He did not step back. He unclipped his baton with a small metallic click that hit me harder than any shout, and this is where I wish I could tell you it surprised me. It did not. I'd seen that movie. Same actor, different uniform. Pattern interrupt. He did not go for me. He went for the symbols, like joy itself was contraband. He had the right to search and destroy. He brought the baton down on the cake, and the first strike sounded like a wet book thrown against a wall. Frosting sprayed vanilla sponge folded. The white tears collapsed into a slumped mess that looked obscene on a day that was supposed to be beautiful. He swiveled and took the champagne tower next. A glittering catastrophe, crystal and bubbles scattering across the stone like 1,000 tiny alarms going off at once. He moved to the gift table, efficient and vicious, breaking a vase, tearing into wrapped boxes, splintering anything that stood upright, as if height offended him. He wasn't just smashing things, he was trying to smash a message into us. Your celebration does not belong here. Your music does not belong here. Your skin does not belong here. Do you think that's fair? If it were your backyard, your mother under that oak, your wife's dress, now freckled with cake and glass, would you step in, step back, or hit record? Something happens when training kicks in. You split. Part of you absorbs the blow as a groom, throat-tight fists hot, every cell yelling no at once. The other part becomes a machine. Timestamp, 3:47 p.m. weapon. Standard issue baton. Observable actions. Targeted destruction of property, explicit bias uttered. You people witness count. Dozens, including 2 VIPs I hadn't seen yet, because adrenaline turns the world into a tunnel. I let the machine part steer because emotion was a trap door I might not climb back out of if I fell through it. I fixed details in my mind while frosting dripped off the table edge and into the soft cracks of our brand new patio. He stopped because he got tired, not because he found a conscience. He stood there breathing hard, baton sticky with sugar, and pointed its tip at my chest like an exclamation point. Let this be a lesson, he said loud and solemn, as if he had prevented a riot rather than created one. This is a quiet community. We have standards. And then calm walked into the chaos. I believe that's quite enough, Officer Miller, a voice said from the shade. Not loud, not aggressive, but shaped like a command. He turned. The man who stepped forward wore a blazer, not a uniform, but the bearing was unmistakable. I'm your boss, he said. Chief of Police Frank Reynolds. Another man stood beside him, the kind of face that lives on podiums and posters. And I'm Mayor David Collins. We were invited. We saw everything. Twist. The power he thought he owned had been standing under that oak tree watching him audition for his downfall. You could watch it happen to him in real time. The swagger drain, the color run out of his jaw, the brain fail to reconcile what his prejudice told him with what the world put in front of his eyes. The baton fell from his hand and clattered on stone. The chief didn't raise his voice. He made it smaller and sharper the way knives look dull until they meet the right pressure. Cuffs, he said, palm out. And on my patio with the band still holding their breath, with my mother holding a napkin over her mouth like a rosary, the chief took the cuffs off a belt and put them on the wrists that had just smashed a wedding. Yeah, that happened. We all want that to be the end. The part where the bully gets caught by the adults, the credits roll, and the popcorn is still warm. But it wasn't the end. It was the start of what justice looks like when you stop at punishment, and the start of what justice requires when you go further than that. Because while the chief was reading rights and the mayor was calling a car from a different precinct to take custody, that matters, write it down, a different precinct. A different show had already started across town. Before we go there, let me stick you in the silence that came after. The sirens faded. The quartet packed up in the kind of hush that musicians keep for backstage grief. Our closest people stayed. You can tell who those are when the chairs scrape back for real. The catering crew did triage, moved with the competent melancholy, of people who have cleaned up after harder days than this, scraped frosting into plastic tubs, swept glass with long strokes, asked me where to stack the ruined gifts. The light got lower, the air cooled, and right there in the wreckage we turned a reception into a war council. Me, Lena, the chief, the mayor. 4 mugs of coffee on a table that had somehow survived the storm, 4 sets of eyes that understood how quickly a narrative can harden if you let someone else write it first. "They're already spinning," the chief said. He didn't have to define they. You could see them from here even if you couldn't hear them yet. The sergeant who knows exactly how to phrase a report so it sounds official and smells like a cover, the union rep who can turn a shattered cake into a story about officer safety, the chorus of talking points about loud parties, aggressive crowds, furtive movements, fear for life. "Then we changed the stage," Lena said. Quiet, clear, unshakable. She hadn't raised her voice once, not even when our day was broken in front of her, and now she used it like a tool. "This isn't one man's mistake. This is a place where a man like that grows. If we only cut him down, the roots stay. We need to dig." So we mapped it. 3 fronts. Internal, criminal, political, federal. The chief would move first and fast. Immediate suspension for Miller request, criminal charges for assault with a deadly weapon, destruction of property, official misconduct, push for hate crime enhancements, and suspend his direct supervisor. Sergeant Bill O'Connell, pending an internal affairs sweep of every use of force complaint they'd handled. The mayor would take the podium, 10 a.m. Not to do that soft shoe dance you see when officials get spooked, but to say the words out loud that cities choke on to invite federal oversight, instead of trying to block it, to announce reforms not as promises, but as decisions already made. And me, I would open the federal case before the sun could even finish coming up. Civil rights investigation subpoenas for personnel, files, training records, complaint histories, internal emails, union communications, everything. O'Connell touched everything. The union rep named Don Kramer whispered into a strategy. We clinked mugs. Not for celebration. For commitment. If you've ever looked around at the ashes of something that was supposed to be perfect and decided to make the fire pay rent, you know that clink, cut to fluorescent light. The precinct. O'Connell's hand slamming a booking desk, the sound not of authority, but of habit. "What the hell is this?" The line good old boys learn at the Academy of Posture. A young booking officer, back straight, voice steady, a future we need more of, says the arrest was made by Chief Reynolds. The mayor witnessed it. That slows O'Connell like a speed bump he didn't see, but it doesn't change his route. "There are 2 sides to every story," he growls, and you can almost hear the report writing itself. The homeowner was non-compliant. The crowd was hostile. The officer feared for his safety. Property was damaged in the attempt to secure the scene. Furtive movement toward the waistband. Erratic behavior. The greatest hits on loop scored by a union rep whose smile snaps shut like a stapler. In a small room with a humming vent, Kramer leans toward Miller. "You say nothing unless I say," he instructs. "You felt your life was in danger. The homeowner made an aggressive move. You saw a glint of metal. You responded according to training. The smashed items were collateral damage in a rapidly evolving situation. Loud, aggressive music. Hostile crowd. Outnumbered." Miller mumbles something about cake and Kramer waves it away like sugar on his sleeve. They will turn a groom into a suspect by the time the copy machine warms up if you let them. They have practice. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. Before dawn, our field office hummed. If you've never felt the way a federal building wakes up when the work matters, it's not loud, it's focused. Coffee in a line, jackets on chairbacks, monitors warming to life, the air a fraction colder, like it gets when the temperature drops before a storm. I sat in my office, tie off, sleeves rolled, and watched as Agent Davis slid a screen in front of me. "You need to see this," he said. "No drama, just the kind of calm urgency that means we are about to know something we cannot unknow." Personnel file. Thin neat, the version that gets printed for awards banquets. Sealed internal affairs file. The real book. The one you need a warrant and a spine to read. 17 complaints in 12 years. 9 for excessive force, 5 for verbal abuse and harassment, 3 for explicit racial profiling. Patterns you can trace with your finger like roots on a map. The dance steps were always the same. Citizen files complaint often a person of color. Officer writes report full of magic words that make judges lean back instead of lean in. Supervisor interviews other officers but not the citizen. Complaint unfounded. File closed. Reset. I stopped breathing for a second on number 5. By number 9, I wasn't counting horror. I was logging evidence. Davis ran another cross-check and turned the screen. 6 of those complainants had sued the city. The city attorney's office didn't settle because it learned something. It settled because NDAs are cheaper than integrity. Drag it out, make it expensive to tell the truth, pay a little gag a lot. The math works if you never factor in the cost of a backyard like mine. Then we hit the email vein. If you've ever found the piece of correspondence that turns rumor into record, you know the feeling. Skin electric, throat dry, the future tilt a few degrees. A chain between O'Connell and Kramer from last year. Kramer: "This one's a little messy. There's a witness we need to make sure Miller's report and the other responding officer's report are perfectly aligned. Emphasize the suspect's erratic behavior. I'll handle the witness. We'll make him out to be a crank." O'Connell: "Already done, the reports are identical. He won't be a problem." That's not protecting a cop from unfair scrutiny. That's manufacturing a reality. That's obstruction. That's falsifying official documents. That's a conspiracy under color of law. We didn't cheer. We placed it where it belonged on the board and built the path from that line to a courtroom. At 10 a.m., the press room sounded like a beehive. Cameras whispered calculations, the scent of a story big enough to chew. The mayor stepped up and did not do the thing politicians do when they fall back on words like unfortunate and regrettable and ongoing. He said, "I'm not going to waste your time with platitudes." And then he did what leaders do when they choose fire over fog. He invited the Department of Justice to investigate the entire Oak Creek Police Department. Not a single bad actor, not a thin apology, a full pattern or practice probe with the force of the federal government behind it. The chief followed and did something you rarely see. He held up a thick file and said, "This is the internal affairs record of an officer in my department, and it shows 17 complaints dismissed." He said there was evidence of coordinated efforts to align false reports and intimidate witnesses. He announced O'Connell's suspension and a criminal investigation into obstruction and falsification. Then he rolled out reforms that sounded like steel: an independent civilian review board with subpoena power, a rewritten use of force policy that centers de-escalation, a zero-tolerance policy for any officer who files a false report. Union backlash came like rain after thunder. Statements about brave officers under attack morale, witch hunts, politics. I respect unions and I respect anyone who puts on a uniform and chooses service. What I don't respect is a shield for dishonesty. We didn't respond to their adjectives with our own. We responded with receipts. Body cam logs with suspicious gaps that always seemed to line up with moments when citizens remembered pain. CAD timestamps that contradicted neat blocks of text in reports. Screenshots of emails where a witness became a crank in the time it takes to hit send. It was a grind. Grind means interviews and timelines and footnotes, and the quiet patience of 1,000 small verifications. Grind means the part of justice that doesn't make TV. Grind means Lena leaning her head on my shoulder at 1 a.m. on the new patio the city would eventually help pay for, and both of us staring at the oak tree in the dark, listening to leaves, reminding ourselves why it matters, that a home stays a home even when someone tries to teach you it is not. Pattern interrupt. I wish I could tell you I forgave him. I did not. Forgiveness is not a requirement for truth. What I found instead was a friend to rage called purpose. A month out, the DA brought O'Connell and Kramer in and read them a language they had weaponized against others. Plea discussions started because they could feel the floor slanting. Miller stalled, then followed. The mountain of evidence started to press back the way mountains do when you climb the wrong side. 6 months after the cake, we were in a wood-paneled courtroom that felt less like a stage and more like a machine room. No fireworks, just the slow turn of gears. Miller took 5 years for assault property destruction and official misconduct. O'Connell took 3 for obstruction. Kramer lost his license and landed on 2 years probation. I won't lie. That last part felt small for a man whose sentences had built cages for so long, but the message landed where it needed to land. This is no longer a safe job for lies. Our civil suit settled for $50,000. If that feels like the price tag on a memory, that's because it is. We donated all of it to a nonprofit that provides legal aid to victims of police misconduct. People called it noble. It wasn't. It was a calculation. That money would do more good in the hands of someone standing at the start of this road than it would sitting on our mantle like a consolation trophy. We needed to convert what happened to us into fuel for someone else's fight. Meanwhile, the investigation at the department became a mirror some folks didn't want to look into. A civilian board was seated, and subpoena power meant something because they used it. Body cam policy changed. Training changed. Report writing changed. They started banning phrases that had turned into magic spells, furtive movement, erratic behavior, unless they were specifically defined and matched by footage or independent witness. A phrase without proof stopped being a door to walk through and started being a red flag. Officers grumbled. Good ones exhaled. You could feel it. A rotation, not a revolution, but enough of a turn that something new could see the light. And at home, we learned the part they don't tell you about justice. Justice doesn't pick up the glass. Justice doesn't wipe frosting out of patio cracks. Justice does not make the oak tree grow faster over the place your heart broke. That is on you and the people who love you. Lena planted jasmine along the fence because she wanted a scent that belonged to a memory. We chose not one that was chosen for us. She knelt in the dirt with that same calm she used at hospital shifts, when parents brought in children, and fear clung to them like a fog. I knelt beside her with a trowel and tried to pretend I knew anything about coaxing life back up from soil. We watered. We waited. We learned patience again, this time not as a tactic, but as a way to live. Do you think that's fair? That the part we call justice can end up being the smallest part of healing? Or is that the point, that the system should be the framework, and we build the house inside it ourselves? If it were you, would you have moved after all that, boxed up the pain, and found a new neighborhood so you could breathe without catching a leftover shard in your throat? Or would you have stayed to claim the space with both hands and the stubbornness of a tree? We stayed. Not because we wanted to win some invisible argument with a man already learning prison time, but because leaving would have meant he wrote our last sentence. Staying meant we did. A few neighbors avoided eye contact those first weeks, like we were a reminder of a thing they'd rather forget. Most waved some brought casseroles like we were grieving a person and not a day. The sax player mailed us a video from his kitchen of the song he'd been playing when the baton came out. It cracked in the middle, and he laughed, and then he held the note until it settled. We played it on the patio, just the two of us, with a single tier cake our friend baked at midnight, because anger and love lead to sugar sometimes. We ate it with forks out of the box with champagne straight from the bottle. It tasted like vanilla and relief and something else I can't fully name that sits somewhere between closure and defiance. Now let me tell you something that might stir the comments, because I want to hear where you stand. Punishment felt necessary. Not because I needed revenge, but because a line had to be drawn in ink, not chalk. But punishment alone is a circle, satisfying to watch from above, dizzy to walk inside. The day after sentencing, a reporter asked me if I felt justice had been served. I said yes and no. Yes, because consequence came. No, because consequence isn't the same as repair. Then she asked if I thought O'Connell and Kramer deserved more time. I said maybe. And I said something else I meant more than I liked. I wanted the policies that protected them to get life sentences. I wanted a culture to serve time. Is that possible? I don't know. But I know this. 6 months after we planted Jasmine, the chief invited me to speak to a room of supervisors about truth in reporting. I told them the only way to write the phrase I feared for my life is to follow it with because, and the because better be measurable, not a feeling married to a face. It got quiet. Some eyes got hard. Some heads nodded. We shook hands. A few hands were limp. A few gripped like they meant it. You take your wins where the door opens a crack. Pattern interrupt. Remember the first 3 seconds of this story. Cake. Baton. Hate in the air. Remember the twist in the middle. The chief and the mayor in the crowd. The cuffs coming off the wrong belt. Remember the second twist a little later. Emails that turned a rumor into a map. People love to say bad apples like rot is a one-off. You prune a branch, feel virtuous, post a statement, move on. But rot spreads when the tree grows in soil that rewards it, and the orchard looks the other way because the fruit still looks shiny from the road. We didn't just cut. We started tending. It will take seasons. It might take generations. But if nobody starts, nothing moves. So here's the question I want to leave in your throat, where it will tickle until you answer it for yourself. What is justice where you live? Is it a number of years on a sheet of paper, or is it a policy that keeps a different afternoon from becoming a copy of mine? Or is it both, or something else entirely that we haven't had the courage to try because it doesn't fit into a headline? Do you think it's fair to expect a system to heal what it broke, or does healing always fall to the people who got hurt, neighbors and nonprofits and late-night conversations and gardens that smell like something you chose? If it were you, if you stood where I stood, frosting on your shoes, the word you people still echoing against the fence, would you have kept your hands open or curled them, or aimed your phone and recorded every second? There isn't a right answer. There is only the answer that lets you sleep, and the answer that lets the next person live. I'll tell you mine one last time. We chose to turn our worst day into a lever. We chose to take their narrative and break it into the data points that courts understand. We chose to donate the money because we could, and because someone else couldn't. We chose to stay to plant Jasmine, to let the oak witness both our sorrow and our stubborn joy. We chose to keep talking even after some people got tired of hearing about it, Because silence feeds the thing that tried to break us, and anger, when it learns to read, can write laws. Wherever you are right now, on a couch with a mug that went cold during this story, parked outside a job on a break, bones tired on a night shift with a screen light that's too harsh, I want to hear you. If this were your backyard, if this were your wedding, if this were your street, what would you have done and what should your city do when the badge crosses the line and calls it order? Drop your thoughts in the comments, argue with me if you think I'm wrong, tell me where you're watching from, and tell me the time justice showed up for you, or the time it didn't, and you had to become the person you were waiting for. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who thinks this could never happen where they live, someone who knows it happens exactly where they live. Hit subscribe if you want stories that don't stop at the tidy ending, because real life rarely does. Stick around, because the next one might be the one that changes the way your city writes its reports. And if it helps to picture the end, picture this: two people on a patio that used to be a crime scene, forks in a cake that tastes like resilience jasmine, climbing a fence like it was always meant to find the sun.